Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to It's Time to Vote. This is a webinar with the Election Modernization Coalition on everything you need to know about voting options for the upcoming November 5th election. This is a huge election. There's a ton of attention on it, and we're expecting historic turnout. We want to make sure that we're providing this resource for you today where you can learn about your options, the timelines, the deadlines, even some resources. But then also we're going to hold some space at the end for some questions. So we hope you have some good questions for us. You are in the presence of an amazing team of voting rights experts here that are all part of our coalition. And I'm going to real quick open it up for these folks to all introduce ourselves. Just share your name and the organization that you're here from. So I'm Jeff Foster. I'm from Common Cause, Massachusetts.
Hi, Cheryl Clyburn Crawford here, Executive Director of Mass Vote, and I use the She Series.
I'm Barbara L'Italian, also use She Series Disability Law Center.
Marisol Santiago, Policy and Organizing Director with Mass Vote, she, her pronouns.
Nell Forgas, League of Women Voters, also she, her.
Hi, Tracy Griffith. I'm the Racial Justice Director at the ACLU of Massachusetts, She, Her series.
Hi, I'm Janet Dominitz from MassPerg. Welcome everybody, She Series.
And Faye Ruth, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, apologies. Faye Ruth Fisher from the Jewish Community Relations Council, She Series.
Well, welcome everyone, and welcome everyone who's tuning in. Thank you so much. We have a lot of information for you, but we're going to go quickly through it so we make sure we can get to a good Q&A at the end here. I do want to make sure folks know if you have accessibility or language needs, there are closed caption options that you can turn on. If on the bottom of your screen, you go to a feature for closed captions, it'll also prompt you to choose a language. They're not perfect, but we do think that they're a really important resource. We want to make sure we're making you aware of them on the outset. Without further ado, we are going to jump into it. But before we get into all the details, why? Why are we doing this webinar? Well, we're doing it because we are already in election season. 3 weeks from today is the November 5th election. There's so much on the ballot from president to Congress, but also at the state level with our state senators and state representatives. We have governor's counselors on the candidate, registers of deeds, clerks of the courts. We also have 5 questions. Now, we're not going to get into the substance of the questions, but at the end, we are going to make sure we connect you all with really great resources to do your own research on what the yes or no votes are. But there's a lot at stake. It's a huge consequential election. It's gotten a ton of attention, and we assume that you're tuning in today because you're excited to vote, but you want to learn more about your options. And we're going to jump right into that now. So we're going to talk about vote by mail and absentee voting. We're going to talk about early voting. We're going to talk about also, as part of this process, when you might be required to show an ID, which sometimes you may be needed to do so, although Massachusetts generally doesn't require it. We're going to talk about disability access and specific ways and resources for folks who might need special accommodations for voting. We're going to talk about important deadlines. There are a lot of deadlines that we need to be aware of under state law, so we're going to make sure you know about those. And then finally, we're going to connect you with a bunch of really helpful voting resources that you can take with you after the webinar to look into finding out how to vote and to get plugged in around information. And then most importantly, we're going to do a Q&A. First things first, thanks to the Votes Act that this coalition worked really hard to advocate for. We now have an expanded few options for voting here in Massachusetts. My job is to talk to you about vote by mail and absentee voting. So first and foremost, you can request a vote by mail ballot on your own. You also probably saw that you were all mailed. Everyone in Massachusetts who's a registered voter got in their mail an application to request a mail ballot that you could have or maybe already returned. It's important to note that if you do want to vote by mail, there is a deadline by which you need to apply for a ballot. So the deadline for this coming election is 5 p.m. Tuesday, October 29th. We're going to talk more about that in the deadline conversation. But I want to make sure we flag that the Secretary of State recommends 2 to 3 weeks before Election Day, which is today, that if you really want to make sure you get your ballot on time, you can return it on time, that you're applying by now. So this is really well timed. This is why today's called It's Time to Vote. But also, when you're returning your ballot, there are several options for returning it. You could mail it back using the envelope they provide. You could hand deliver it to your local election office. You could drop it off at a secure drop box, which you can also look here. You can find where your local drop boxes are with a link. This is really important. Your ballot needs to reach your local election office or drop box by the close of polls on election day in order to be counted. The only exception, which is in effect for this election, is that for ballots returned by mail in the biennial state elections, if they're postmarked on election day, they're able to be counted up to 3 days after if they arrive. But if you're not sure, the best bet is to make sure you're bringing it in person to your local election office or drop box by close of business on election day. Again, there are a few important deadlines. We're going to cover them again in a moment. But what I really want to flag for you, if you want to vote by mail, is, and this is really important, if you've got your mail ballot in your hand on election day, you cannot drop it off at your polling location. Your ballot must reach your local election office or drop box by the close of polls on election day in order to be counted. This is really important. The only exception, again, is if they're mailed through the mail. But if you got it in your hand and you want to turn it in, go to your city hall or town hall or go to your drop box, but don't try to go to your actual polling location. Finally, before I hand things off to Nell to talk about early voting, I want to make sure folks are also aware of the Track Your Ballot Online tool. There's a great tool through the Secretary of State's website where you can track your ballot all the way from when you request one to when you send it back and to whether it was counted or not. This is a great feature to make sure that you're feeling confident in the administration and in getting your ballot back in time to make sure it's counted. So please make sure to use this tool. We'll provide links that you need for it. I'm now going to pass it over to my friend Nell, who's going to talk about early voting.
Thanks, Jeff. For those of you who may not be familiar with in-person early voting is an opportunity to vote in person at the polls prior to election day. So the window for early voting, as you can see here on the slide, begins on Saturday, October 19th, and ends on Friday, November 1st. Polling hours will vary by municipality, so please be sure to check your local polling hours before you go. There will be weekend hours available. You can check the hours at www.voteinma.com. And if you're not registered to vote yet, note on this calendar that you can still register to vote until Saturday, October 26th. And now I'm going to hand off to the ACLU.
Great. Hello, everyone. So it's important to note that Massachusetts does not require voters to present ID while voting in most cases. But voters might be asked to show ID in the following circumstances. If you're voting for the first time in Massachusetts in a federal election, if you are an inactive voter, you are casting a provisional or challenged ballot, you might be asked to provide ID. So what kinds of ID can you use? You can use a driver's license, you can use a state ID card, a recent utility bill, a rent receipt or a copy of your lease, a copy of the voter registration affidavit could be used. For students who might be here in Massachusetts attending college, a letter from a school dorm or your housing office could be used. And any other kind of printed ID which contains your name and your address. So those are the kinds of acceptable identification. Just keep in mind, it has to include your name and the address in which you are registered to vote. Coming up next, who's next? Disability rights.
Hi, this is Barbara L'Italian from the Disability Law Center. There's a lot of information on the next two slides because we'll be sending around the slides. I'm not going to be able to cover this with any depth, but I'm also going to mention an event next week. That's an hour-and-a-half webinar that will do a deep dive into all of these issues. So I just want to be sure, just to start, that people understand that even if you're under guardianship, most people can vote, unless if you're under guardianship and have a specific clause that says that you cannot vote, you are able to vote. And I would say many people have no idea that that is the case. I also want to be sure that people understand that if you reside in a nursing home, a group home, assisted living, veterans homes, if you're under civil commitment, if you're in jails and prisons and have not been convicted of a felony, you are absolutely welcome to vote. And in fact, we went out last week and registered people at Bridgewater State Hospital. This next piece we'll go into in great detail a week from now at the Rev Up Disability Voting webinar that's at the bottom of the screen. But in terms of physical accessibility, we're looking at the outside of polling places to make sure that people with physical disabilities are able to get into the building. And that can be the parking lot, how you get to the polling place, the entrances, etc. And there are very specific things that we can measure and monitor. And we're actually training a cadre of people to help us with this, to give this important information back to the Secretary of State. Once you get inside, you are allowed to use the AutoMark machine. Anyone can use it, but it is really set up to make sure that those who cannot see, if they're visually impaired, it gives an audio cue. And it also is for those who have the inability to fill out physically filling in the bubble. But we want to be sure that it's open, that it's working, that there is a poll worker that knows how to explain how it works, and that it's in a private area. We can go to the next. Oh, at the bottom is the DLC link for the webinar, where we'll go into great detail training people on this. So you're more than welcome to come a week from today at 1 o'clock. The one that I really want to talk about, because very few states have this, is the ability to vote electronically by mail. This was one as a result of a court battle that DLC engaged in, among others. And so there is the opportunity, if you lack the ability to fill out a ballot independently and would like to do this at home using your accessibility apparatus, that you can. And very few people know this happens in Massachusetts, but there is a process. You have to fill out an accessible vote by mail application. And then once it's received, if it's approved, you're going to get instructions on how to access this with an email with a PIN to log in, etc. And then you are able to vote, as I said, electronically. You could also, if you wanted to, complete it and actually physically return it. But if you were to return it electronically, it has to be in by 8 o'clock, the close of the polls on Tuesday, November 5th. So it's a very underutilized thing that could be used for a bunch of people, particularly perhaps people who are in institutions. So I just want to be sure people know about that, and the links are there, and this will be sent around. Thank you. And are we going to Cheryl next? Yes, okay.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is such great information. Anyway, I'm going to go over the deadlines really quick here again. The really important ones, right? Like the voting deadline. Early voting starts this Saturday, October 19th, all the way through November 1st. But if you're voting in person, you must vote November 5th at your polling location. And that polling location will be open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I just want to make sure you understand the difference. Early voting has its own set of early voting locations, and you can vote anywhere. But on election day, you must vote at your polling location between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. Now, the registration deadlines, if you're in person at your local election office by October 26, 5 p.m., you must turn it in person at the local election office. If you're doing it online, you have to October 26 till 11:59 p.m. Online, October 26th. The deadline is still October 26th, but online you have till 11:59 p.m. And of course, by mail, it must be postmarked by the 26th. Okay. Now, if you're doing, you want to request a ballot, they must have received it by October 29th, 5 p.m. And if you're returning the ballot by mail, it must be postmarked by November 5th. And returning the ballot in person, November 5th by 8 p.m. So here's where I want to say, do not wait. Vote early. Don't wait to turn in your ballot. If you already have it, send it in right now. Don't wait till the deadline. The only thing is, if you're going to vote in person, of course, that's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. But if you actually have the ballot in your hand, don't wait to drop it in the ballot box, right? At the libraries. What we're asking you to do, vote early. We have early voting that's happening 2 weekends, almost 2 whole weeks. You have all of this time to vote early anywhere. So we're asking you to go ahead and do that. Don't wait. This is crucial. This is critical that every vote count. Every vote counts this season. So we're asking you to make sure and to ensure that yours is counted. And then we have up next Marisol.
Great. Again, hi everybody, Marisol with Mass Vote. We're talking about all the important deadlines, ways you can vote and participate in this very important election. And again, really excited to be here with all our partners in democracy through our coalition work. We wanted to list here on this slide different voting resources that you can access from home and share with your family and friends, especially in your community spaces. Folks, once they have access to these resources, they feel more empowered, more confident in being able to go and vote, and that's what we want. So on this slide, you'll see, as we discussed earlier, Rev Up is a great resource for people. As you heard from Barbara, talking about the different ways that people can access the ballot, especially from our disability community, which is so important. Vote 411 is also a great resource. Thank you to our comrades from the League of Women Voters. That also has a list of different resources that you might find helpful. And again, look through these things, and if you think of somebody that might need it, please share. Studentvote.org is another resource that's been put together by one of our coalition members. And what we do want to uplift is we're going to have people out in the field on election day, volunteers that are going to be making sure that folks are able to access their ballots at their local polling locations. We are gearing up for our election protection work that we do every 4 years. And you can learn more about that at election protection here. Again, the slides will be sent, so you can click on those links. But more importantly, we have a ton of hotline numbers that are going to be made available on November 5th. You can reach these lines by dialing 1-866-OUR-VOTE for English speakers. There's also a very, very good list of different language accessibility hotlines that will be provided on November 5th. These lines will be powered up by our good friends, volunteer, nonpartisan staff attorneys that will be able to assist folks at the polls with any questions or concerns that they might have. Lastly, on the slide, it's Massachusetts, yes, has 5 statewide ballot questions. Please take a moment to click on this link and learn how important each of these questions are and participate. Use your voice, right? And definitely, again, reach out to people in your community, talk to people about the importance of these various questions. Lastly, on ballot questions, some city and towns might have an individual city or town question. We want to make sure that these here are the 5 statewide ballot questions. And as provided in the chat, to know where you vote, you want to go to wheredoivote.ma.com. And that will allow you to place your address and access what a sample ballot will look like for you in your city or town. So take a moment to prepare. Please take a moment to think about what your plan is to vote. Early vote starting Saturday, whether it's in person or whether you're going to be, helping to support family and friends. Want to make sure that we continue to protect democracy, and that starts with each of us. So thank you all for being here, and please make sure to access these resources.
Excellent. Well, thank you to our team. Again, just amazing voting rights advocates and organizers, experts in their own right here. So appreciate all the information being shared. We're going to spend the next 9 minutes or so just open. If folks have questions, feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. I do see one question from Cindy asking, is it too late to sign up to be a poll monitor on November 5th? I did this in 2022 and would like to volunteer again. I'll need a refresher training. Any of these sessions coming up? Yes, perfect. So this is our election protection program. Again, as Marisol shared, it's a nonpartisan poll monitoring program. We are still recruiting, so feel free to visit www.protectthevote.net and sign up, and we'll be in touch soon about scheduling a training. We have trainings coming up just in the next few days. So yes, Cindy, please, would be great. Very lucky to have you join us.
Could I just jump in and say that in terms of anyone who's out at the polls doing that monitoring, DLC, in collaboration with a number of disability groups, has a phone app where people can quickly check in on through the app to be able to let us know what the entranceway looks like and whether or not the AutoMark machine is working. Again, anyone can cast their vote using AutoMark. It's critical to know those pieces of information too, because those are real barriers for people with disabilities. So you could actually do both. And we are doing an in-depth training, as I mentioned, next week on what we look for in terms of polling place accessibility. And there's a really quick and easy phone app that can get loaded on your phone to be able to give just the shorthand on what it was like at your polling place. Were there parking spaces? You know, what was there an incline to get into the building? Was the door too heavy to be opened, etc. So we're going to get into great detail, but I feel like the two can work together as a yes and proposition, because it's all about making sure that people are able to get in and able to vote.
Awesome. Barbara, thank you. Thank you so much for that work. We have time for a few more questions if folks have any. So I see again here, and yep, just a recap. And so Cheryl said this, early voting starts Saturday. So, and vote by mail is already underway. There's actually reporting over the weekend where Secretary of State William Galvin was reporting that they're already tabulating vote by mails ballots that are being sent back. So the election's not 3 weeks away. It's now. It is time to vote. You can vote by mail. You can vote early in person starting on Saturday. Or if you want to keep it old school and wait until Tuesday, November 5th, you can vote at your local polling location between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. So really excited. Vote early.
And I,
It's fun.
and I would just, mention, Jeff, because I know there's been also some news about uh, some of the struggles that the United States Postal Service is having. And I would just reiterate that earlier the better. I think voting by mail is such an important tool and does make voting more accessible and more convenient for so many people. Just a reminder that the earlier you can do it, the better. But absolutely, vote by mail is so important and something this coalition has fought for. And as you said, people are already doing it. So it's good news.
One other thing that I didn't go over, but it's important to also know that should you have planned to vote in person and find that you're in an emergency hospitalization, that you can technically ask someone to apply for and give you an emergency absentee ballot, and that can be delivered to wherever it is you are. And then you are able to vote there as well. It doesn't happen all that often, but you never know. Something could happen that causes you to land in a hospital, and you would still be able to, under the absentee voting piece, be able to vote.
So can I just further ask Barbara on that piece? You can ask for the ballot. That means call City Hall or something and put in a request for them. Or can you have like my sister go pick one? How can someone transport my ballot to and from me or anything like that?
I believe that they can transport it to you, but Jeff, if you know different, I Yeah, I think under those circumstances, you can have someone pick that up for you and bring it to you, literally to the hospital.
Under those special circumstances. Otherwise,
Right.
yeah, it would be
Yes.
the voter. I do see one more question in the chat, and then we will wrap up. The question is, what is the function of police at polling places? Are they poll workers or just security? Good question. So state law actually requires that there be a police officer at each polling location. The rationale for that state law is primarily around making sure they're providing security and a sense of safety. We know that our Secretary of State's office has done a really thorough job partnering both with the state police and local law enforcement to make sure that folks are trained about what is the appropriate role of law enforcement at a polling location. But they are there specifically, yes, to provide safety and security. They otherwise are not a function of election administration. The person who is in charge of the polling location election administration is the poll warden. So if folks are curious or want to ask a question and get a really good answer while you're at your polling location, definitely ask for your warden. Or if you're at City Hall or Town Hall, it would be your town clerk, or in some cities, it might be your elections director. So those are really the authorities that we would encourage folks with questions to go to. Otherwise, yes, under state law, police are at our polling locations to provide security. Uh,
Hey,
Folks,
Jeff, oh, sorry.
yep,
I, I'm just, I would be negligent if I didn't put in a plug for one of the resources that was mentioned, studentvote.org. I know sometimes there's a bit of confusion over if a student, spends summers at home in X state, but they're students here for the year. So please use studentvote.org. Of course, we want 100% participation from students, whether you vote here or whether you cast a absentee ballot at the place of your family. Either way, you got to vote and go to studentvote.org to find out more.
thank you, Janet. And thanks to the whole team here. Again, folks, we really appreciate you tuning in. We hope that this was a helpful resource. We will be making sure to send out to everyone a link to these resources and the slideshow that we went through today. But just to close, we are the Election Modernization Coalition. We are a coalition that's over 14 years old. That is the ACLU of Massachusetts. It's Common Cause Massachusetts. It's the Massachusetts Voter Table. It's MassPIRG. It's Lawyers for Civil Rights. It's the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts. It's the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Boston. It's the Disability Law Center. It's Mass Vote. And it's the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. And I'll end by saying this. Let's stop thinking about Election Day as the end of something. Let's start thinking about Election Day as the start of something. Because our coalition is not just dedicated to making sure you have the knowledge and resources and access to casting a ballot that counts on Election Day. We're also committed to the long-term work to dismantle structural barriers to voting. And so we are going to be taking all of our experience from this election, November 5th, into our advocacy at the State House in January of 2025 and beyond. And we'd love for you all to stay with us as we continue to do that important advocacy and education to make sure that we have truly a modernized election system that ensures that every eligible voter can cast a ballot that counts here in Massachusetts. So stay connected and don't forget, you can vote by mail, you can vote early in person, or you can vote on Tuesday, November 5th, but make sure you vote. Thanks, everyone.